I want to say welcome to everyone. I'm Bill Valerio, the director of Woodmere, and I am just so excited for the event that we have ahead of us, which is a conversation with some very special friends about the film A Call to Spy. And I just couldn't be more excited about it. I'm going to introduce the event and our speakers in a minute, but first I just wanted to describe some of the Zoom etiquette, which is that we know that people will have to come and go as they need to, and that's of course fine. We will be recording the event tonight, so please bear that in mind. Everyone who is a guest will be muted, but we encourage that you please put questions into the Q&A function of the Zoom webinar. You can find that on the bottom of your on the bottom of your screen. You'll see the Q&A function, and we will leave plenty of time for question and answers at the end of our comments and remarks about the film. With that, I'm going to describe who you're going to be hearing from tonight. You'll be hearing from me. I'll be moderating. I'm the director of Woodmere. My colleague Ann Standish will be fielding questions and organizing the Q&A. And if you have any questions along the way, require technical assistance, please put them also into the Q&A, and we will do our best to help you. I'm here tonight with my friend Barbara Eberlein, who is a specialist and expert who knows more about the texture and fabric, speaking metaphorically, of historic Philadelphia, which features prominently in the film. And I'm here with my friend Sarah Megan Thomas, and it really is wonderful to be sharing this event with Sarah, because A Call to Spy is really one of her children, and Sarah has wonderful children. I think A Call to Spy maybe qualifies as one. Sarah stars in the movie, wrote the screenplay, and produced the film, and it's an incredibly impressive accomplishment. And this event is organized to build excitement around the film, to encourage everybody to not only see it, but tell your friends to see it, and tell your friends to tell their friends to see it. That's how things work in the world today. And we're going to describe just what is so exciting about the film. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Sarah, and ask you to please introduce yourself and describe this exciting project.
Well, thank you, Bill, and Anne for tonight, and Woodmere and Barbara for joining us. So A Call to Spy is the hidden figures of the World War II spy world, and the first film on 3 legendary female spies, Virginia Hall, who I play, who was ultimately, after the war, the first woman to work for the CIA, and during the war, the spy the Nazis actually dubbed the most dangerous of all Allied spies, period. Male, female, just dangerous. And Vera Atkins, who is played by Stana Katic, if there are any Castle fans out there, and she is widely considered the real-life inspiration for Miss Moneypenny in James Bond, for James Bond fans, and Noor Inayat Khan, who's played by the top Indian star Radhika Apte, and Noor is Britain's first Muslim war heroine. So it's an incredible group of women that the film follows, and I think we're gonna show a little trailer, Joe, to start.
That's right, here we go.
Desperate for information about France. Churchill has asked us to create a secret army of spies.
This is a rudimentary operation.
Women will be more inconspicuous.
Make sure they're pretty.
For you or for the Germans? I don't believe we've met. Virginia Hall. We could set her up as a journalist.
Good Lord, Vera, she has a wooden leg.
Would you suspect this girl's a spy? Rumor has it you are the best wireless operator in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force.
Signaling is like music, there is a rhythm to it. I'm a pacifist, and they are teaching us to kill. They're training us to survive.
We need you as our first female field agent.
Don't be fooled. Common folks are becoming collaborators.
Acquire information, build resistance,
More courage, more courage.
and set France ablaze.
If you have any doubts, tell me now.
This feels dangerous.
We're here now. Seen it through.
We've had no choice but to learn the hard way how to do this. Trial and a lot of error.
Come on, let's go.
Go now!
The Germans are locating our signals faster than anticipated.
We must keep trying.
Who is she? I'm going to ask one more time.
The Germans will stop at nothing till they find you.
I'm not giving up. We're not giving up. You know we're here only for a short time. But what do we do while we're here? Changes the course of the future.
Well, thank you, Joe, for sharing the trailer, and thank you, Sarah. And we're going to treat this as a question and answer a little bit for a while. And I just want to say, if you haven't seen the movie, it is every bit as exciting as the trailer describes it to be. I was on the edge of my seat all throughout, and also found it to be a provocative intellectual experience. And it had me thinking about history and about something that we do in museums. And that is in all that we do with our installations of the collection or with an exhibition. We are telling stories, and we're telling stories about history, whether it's an art movement or the career of an artist. An exhibition has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an ending. And a question, we ask all the time about this storytelling that we do is, how is it that people living today, the people who are going to come into the museum, why does this history, why does this story matter to life today, to today's life? What is the relevance today of this piece of history? And I guess I'd love to just throw that onto the table, with you, Sarah, and ask you to describe, in the telling of this story, what is it about it that is meaningful today? You're on mute.
I do that all the time, so sorry. Thank you for that question. I think it's a really important one. The film takes place in the early 1940s, and yet in 2020, so much of it is and remains timely. And some of it, was intentional in the crafting of the script and storyline. But at its core, this is a film about the power of the individual. No matter what your diversity, no matter what your religion, to unite and resist against a common evil. And right now, that's such a timely conversation with the pandemic and the world we live in, because we all understand that we're all in this together, and that these little actions, or what we think are little actions, whether that's wearing a mask to protect someone else or going out to vote, actually do make a difference to the entire world. And that is something that these women and these spies in 1940s understood, because they were doing little actions. It's not like a film about, Saving Private Ryan or D-Day at all. It's a film about all these little things that make a big difference. And I really hope that the takeaway is, what would I do? If I really care about something, if things in the world get worse, would I put my life on the line with a 50-50 chance of survival? I don't know if I would. I hope I would, but I don't know. But that's the conversation piece, much like art. When you look at a painting, you have a deep conversation. That's what I hope the takeaway is.
I certainly do get that from the film. Can you talk about the film as a story of women? I mean, it's, I think of you, Sarah, you are a strong woman. You're somebody with, feminist kind of approach to life. I feel like I know you well enough to say that. And did you approach the storytelling, thinking about gender and women's roles in history?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you think about World War II films and spy films, and it was the same with my last film, Equity, which is about Wall Street, when women are involved, they're either side roles or it's part of a romance. It's very rarely just women being good at their jobs, and they just happen to be women. And as a filmmaker, that's what interests me. So when I was looking at kind of which female spies to pick and how to tell that story, it was important that what you see about them is their heroism and their humanity and their fear and everything you might experience as a spy on the field, but not, oh, I'm doing it to go get a guy.
Yeah. Did you take liberties with the historic record in putting the film together? I mean, or are there areas where you would say, well, here's how we made it dramatic, or this is where we, shaped it?
Sure. I mean, definitely. I mean, it's not a documentary, right? It's a feature film. And so we had to take some liberties to tell the narrative in 2 hours, but B, also to explore a broader narrative of people from different nationalities uniting to resist. So liberties I took would be, for example, Virginia Hall and Noor Inayat Khan, they never met. They were historically 2 years apart in the war. That's the biggest liberty that the script takes. That said, I stay true to the historic arc of what happens to them and the things they do along the way. But by making them roommates at training and putting them together in time and space, kind of like Hidden Figures did with those women, it allowed a broader story than just a film about Noor Inayat Khan or just a film about Virginia Hall. When it came to like other things where I would take liberties, one example is Virginia Hall is famous for an epic prison break. And if I had $100 million for this movie, I would do an epic prison break. And it could be an entire movie and it would be fascinating, but that wasn't this film. So I wanted to keep the prison break in the movie as a nod to history. It's totally different than the way she did it, but the way she does it is actually a way SOE spies were historically freed, if that makes any sense. So I'd take a little bit of history from here, a little bit of history in here, and combine it in a way that was authentic to their legacy.
One of the issues of our time today is an urgency around questions of racial justice and racial equity. And Noor's story is profoundly inspiring and moving. And I wonder, how it is that, how did you approach that dimension of the film, that these are people, of different racial backgrounds who do come together for a common cause?
Well, look, I would say that all three lead women are discriminated against for different reasons. Noor, because she's a pacifist, a Muslim, and an Indian woman, a woman of color. Virginia Hall, because she's a woman with a wooden leg and a disability. And Vera Atkins, because she is Jewish, and there's the rise of anti-Semitism even within London. So I think, to me, this story in particular was more a story about quote unquote underdogs, women who were perceived as ordinary or amateurs or discriminated against, and they rose above that to become extraordinary heroes.
A last question I'll ask on this sort of broad subject of relevance. There's a moment in the film where I think there's a Nazi exhibition going on, and one of the characters said, "Oh my God, all this misinformation is just crap," or something. It's about misinformation. And I felt like bells going off in my head in terms of just what we're living through right now.
Well, that wasn't intentional, by the way. Like, when we shot this, I did not know there would be so much false information out there right now. But full transparent. But that's one of the interesting things, is how history repeats itself.
Yeah. And what is truth? And I think, there is a conversation in the film about how do we know what the truth is? And so there's just so much there that talks about the things
Actually,
that artists care about today.
totally. And you just reminded me of something that I think viewers might be interested in knowing about truth and how it's interpreted. There was an exhibit at the Rubin Museum in New York City of Noor Inayat Khan before the pandemic shut down. And I think it might be online. It's called Burn Those Diaries. And what it is the artist took Noor's SOE file and he kind of rearranged it. And her training reports called her a doll. Like, if this girl has brains, I'm Winston Churchill. Yet later on, when she was caught and captured and tortured and didn't say anything, she's a hero. And the art exhibit is how time can change your perception of a human being. It's really interesting.
Wow. It's an amazing intertwining of these three lives and these three stories. So I want to sort of just switch gears a little bit right now and say that it is a very beautiful movie. I mean, from frame to frame, from scene to scene, it's beautifully photographed, it's beautifully shot. And I think one of the reasons it's so beautiful, and it's something that I appreciate, is attention to detail, which I think helps you tell the story. That's how great narratives unfold. It's in the details, and with attention to authenticity. And I thought I might ask Barbara to talk with us a little bit, because again, from the question of the authenticity of the locations, many of them are here in Philadelphia. And Barbara, you're the person we know who knows these places the best. And I really would love to hear you talk about some of the important Philadelphia locations that appear in A Call to Spy.
Oh, wonderful. But before I talk about authenticity in film, I just want to thank Sarah profoundly for making a most beautiful movie that was so sensitive and intelligent and creative in the way that the various locations were interwoven. And I have to say, I just saw this movie for the first time last night. I had no idea that any other Philadelphia location was going to be included in it besides Ardrossan. And as I was watching it, I was pulling apart all the little pieces and watching how truly spontaneously creative the combinations of spaces that were extremely unusual and in some cases only existed in Philadelphia were interwoven with a story that has a much more global impact. So thank you for highlighting all this beautiful architecture. I've had a very long love affair with Ardrossan as a home, the owners as clients, and the restoration over a very long period of time. And I have to say, it's an extremely rare example of an American ancestral home. We're used to it in Scotland and England and in Wales, but an American home still occupied by the original family for whom it was built, and with all its original collections intact. Everything you saw in that movie is in that house and always has been. And when we talk about authenticity and people developing stage sets for movies, we think about people sort of pulling little disparate pieces together and trying to create something that's evocative of an era. But this is it, pure and simple. And, classical buildings ring true every time. And it's amazing that this movie introduces Ardrossan as a location and reinforces that notion that what we're seeing is a very, very different world. It's away from reality. It's away from our reality. And it provides this cocooning environment where the characters who are about to embark on a very difficult mission are sequestered and can concentrate completely on what's at hand and what's coming into their life. I'm reminded of a statement in a recent film that James Ivory made for the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art, where he talks about the house, and these are important things to him, the house being every much a character, an important character in the narrative, as any of the human actors, because it helps to tell the story. Bill, very much what you were just talking about with all of these details reinforcing over and over where the story is going, and not just the main plot structure, but all of those nuances that give it a human feeling. And there's a wonderful line when the recruits first arrive at Ardrossan and they're sort of drummed into the dining room in the living room. And the character says, "Welcome to my Scottish country house. Not the type of place Nazis would expect to be a spy training center, is it?" Well, the house now becomes an undercover spy also. And that's what I liked so much about that James Ivory statement, was that everything that's part of this movie is an essential ingredient in its success. In fact, I felt like I was sleuthing for architectural clues and cues, just like the characters were searching for theirs. And before I saw the film, I thought only Ardrossan was in the movie itself as an actual location. But as you watch more and more of it, and watch how fascinatingly the spaces, the individual spaces, are interwoven with the particulars of the story and the character, it's just amazing. We're all over the house. We're in the storage rooms, and it's the torture area. We're in, my favorite, the men's changing room after the hunt is in the basement. It's a shower room and a changing room, but that's where Yor goes to hide and seek refuge. And these layers and layers, I thought were very creatively done. For example, Virginia uses the butler's pantry at Ardrossan as the site for where she's talking to the women of Lyon about what they're really concerned about. And so here we are in the heart of the house. You're in the pantry, you're in the kitchen, you're in Philadelphia, but you're supposed to be in Lyon. And those interwoven moments I thought were just magical, even if you didn't know where you were and how quickly you were being bounced from one house to another. And then another aspect that I thought was fascinating was it wasn't just Ardrossan. My neighbor's house around the corner at 1801 Delancey, which is a very early famous Frankfurtness house, was actually Vera's mother's house, where she goes to seek refuge and just sob because she's been denied citizenship papers again. And there are moments like that where you just realize, whether or not you're a Philadelphian or anyone else, I recognize that. The Curtis Institute of Music is where the American forces and the British forces, the international spy forces, join together to discuss how they're going to defeat Hitler. And so all of these things, I think, work into a very rich, layered tapestry that is the perfect setting for this background. So Sarah, thank you again for making a beautiful film. You clearly love Philadelphia. You clearly love the aesthetic message that is brought to bear in this film.
Well, thank you, Barbara, because I have to say, it's so much fun when people like you understand all the detailed work that went into finding locations, which was actually the hardest job on this movie, because while I love Philadelphia and I actually bring all my films here, it's not the obvious choice for a film that takes place in France and London. And for this film specifically, it was done for reasons of economy. We didn't have the budget to go to England or France. So I had to come home and make it work. And it did work. And so when you notice places like, Newland Grist Mill or the Curtis Center, it's fun. And I think we should have a game, check how many locations you can find in Philadelphia, because there's a lot. And when you combine it with Budapest, which is where we shot the other portion of this film, the big exteriors with the Nazi trucks, sometimes the scene will have both and you won't even know. So it's fun.
I have to
It's a treasure hunt.
One of my, I'm sorry, Barbara, go ahead.
It's a treasure hunt.
It is a treasure hunt. And Barbara, you found things that I didn't notice, so I'm going to watch it again now.
And the Art Alliance and 1830 Rittenhouse Square. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's
and
wonderful.
the Spring Mill Cafe.
Well, that's what I was going to say. One of my absolute favorite restaurants is in the movie as well, the Spring Mill Cafe, which I bring friends to who are visiting Philadelphia, and they can't believe they're in Philadelphia, even though, technically I know we're, over the line in Conshohocken, but I think the Spring Mill Cafe plays a wonderful role in the film.
And I think I mentioned to you, Bill, that I found that literally because it was a first date in high school. Like the guy I dated in high school took me there as our first fancy, it wasn't the first fancy date. And I was like, this is so nice. And I remembered it. I mean, I think I was 16 years old. So, I mean, it's a long, and so not only did we shoot in the restaurant, but then one of the secrets to making an independent film is that time is money and you can't afford to move. You know, every time you shoot a scene. So even with our dress and like the torture scene, we shot that in the basement, right? The tree over here is London. The tree over here is Scotland. So with the Spring Mill Cafe, you know, they have a private event space, or it's not, you know, an event space next to the restaurant. Yeah, so we shot in there, but then right outside of there, I mean, there's a killing in the movie, and you know, that's where the killing happened, right there. So yeah.
I'll go look for the blood stains on the gravel in the driveway the next time I'm there. It's very cool. Very, very interesting. You talked a little bit about high school. So I'm going to mention, you know, for everybody who is watching, Sarah and I both wore our purple because an experience that sort of brings us together is we both went to the same college. We both went to Williams College. I could not bring myself to wear a gold shirt. I don't actually think I have one anymore. I
have a gold necklace.
Sarah wore a gold necklace. But the serious reason for bringing up Williams College, you know, it is an amazing humanistic education that they offer at the school. And I can't help but think that from where we sit now, the humanities and the thinking skills, the problem solving, the critical thought that a humanistic liberal arts education gives you is just going to play, you know, that much more of an important role in this world that we are about to launch into. And Sarah, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but
Sure.
I bring my Williams education with me everywhere I go.
You know, and I'm sure you hear this all the time in the art world that you work in. You know, there's a line from my last movie, Equity, which I love, and it's "Don't let money be a dirty word." And frankly, I wouldn't have this film without Williams grads because they invested in it. You know, I would write letters to people who I thought might be interested. Some of them would invest, they'd throw parties with other people. And it was a real, you know, film investment is a high risk investment, and it became a real community. And without the Williams community, there would literally be no movie. And that's, so I do want to mention David Hoffman and Joey Horn, who are two executive producers on the film and Williams grads, but there's many more Williams investors.
It's a small world, and you know, Joey and David are just exceptional, extraordinary people, and I have to say it really makes me feel very warm that they are, you know, among those who made the, you know, this amazing film happen. So I'm glad they're getting their shout out. It's so wonderful. I think with that, we should open it up to questions from our guests. And I know Anne and Joe, you've been monitoring the chat and the Q&A. Is there a question that comes from the Q&A that you'd like to?
Well, I'm going to jump protocol. The first one person asks, where can we see the film? Is it on Amazon Prime Video? So.
Yeah, so it's actually everywhere. It's, yes, it's on Amazon. If you go to acalltospymovie.com, it lists everywhere. It's Comcast, Verizon, iTunes, Amazon, Hulu. It's on all platforms. And if you have, it's in the UK, it's coming to Amazon as an original in India Thursday. And if you have friends in Australia and New Zealand, it will have its proper theatrical release in Australia and New Zealand, where they have no coronavirus, December 26th.
Awesome.
I see that, Joe, you just put into the chat the link to the Call to Spy website, which I think will help everybody find it. Thank you, Joe, for doing that.
Another question is, how long was the screenwriting process? Can you share any insights or lessons learned during that creative process?
Sure. The screenwriting process never ends. even through post-production, you're in the edit room and you find, you know, when you're doing test screenings, you're missing something, or that's when you want to go back to the history. So, I mean, start to finish, the project was 4 years. I did script writing for 2 years, but while I was doing that, I was doing location scouting in Philadelphia and fundraising and casting, etc. And in terms of like the process or tips or anything like that, you know, I think it's really helpful that I am an actress and I do readings with actors, friends, my family. They give real criticism. You get really angry after you're like, no, it's perfect. And then they're right and you fix it. But this one was particularly hard because I was trying to honor 3 women's legacies in the course of a 2-hour movie and get the plot. So that was the trick with this one. My next film's gonna be one person.
One of the other questions was, what's it like filming in Philadelphia? Does the city make it easy? You know, does the film office work with you?
Oh yeah, I love the film office. Sharon Pinkinson's amazing. With all 3 of my films, she's ensured that I got the tax credit, without which we couldn't have shot here. So it's a 25% tax credit, and that goes into the financing piece of the movie. And we got the same credit in Budapest, which is why we shot there. In terms of the city, it's a wonderful city to shoot because of, you know, not only the people and the crews that you can hire here, and it's kind of been fun. Like some people I hired on my first film, you know, I've retained local Philly hire, and they've, you know, grown so much, and it makes you feel old like a parent. I think we talked about that, but it's a great place to shoot.
Awesome. So somebody else asked about your earlier films. I know Backwards pretty well. Maybe you could tell a little bit about Backwards and Equity and just a little
Sure. So as a filmmaker, I always kind of start with the genre. So I pick a genre that I think is commercial and will make my investors money, because that is part of the goal here. So I loved sports films growing up. I was a rower. I was a rower at Shipley. Loved Bend It Like Beckham. If there are any fans of that, any out there. And so I knew I wanted to tell a sports film, and there'd never been a woman's film about rowing. So that was kind of the first film. It's starring James Van Der Beek from Dawson's Creek. And it really is meant as this PG, family-friendly, vanilla. And I say that not as like a derogatory word, which can be used with filmmaking, but it is a vanilla film. It's meant to be just something you can watch that, you know, hopefully makes you smile and inspires you. And then I wanted to get a little more edgy with my second film. My husband, you know, he worked for Lehman till the bitter end. I like to say, I'm joking around, but I like to say, oh, I married a rich husband and then he went poor and I stayed with him for love. You know, so I've been through kind of the Wall Street thing as a Wall Street wife and saw all these brilliant women, you know, when you go out for drinks, and then you see The Wolf of Wall Street or Margin Call, and where are these brilliant, smart women? And so that was really the inspiration for that movie. And it was the first female-driven Wall Street thriller that premiered at Sundance and sold to Sony Classics. And then A Call to Spy.
Awesome. Another person asked about going back to Ardrossan, that although the Scott family was inspiration for the Philadelphia story, it must have been a real privilege and treat to be able to film there. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, Joni, there were so many people who made, if Joni's on, you know, this movie happen. And I would say that Ardrossan and the people who are involved with Ardrossan behind the scenes are some of the biggest, because without Ardrossan, there is no movie. We shot there, I don't remember how many days, it was 11 or 12. I mean, this was only a 30-day shoot. We shot almost a third of the film at Ardrossan. And one of the things you cannot afford to do as an independent film is dress locations. So Barbara, we were talking earlier about the Art Alliance, and we dressed the third floor of that. Like there's an empty third floor, and that was the one dress we could afford to do, and it was the signal room. But that was it in terms of a dress. So, and by dress, I mean like setting everything. So we had to find a space that had period furniture and build period paintings, because guess what? You have to pay for those too, right? Mm-hmm. And so and get waivers. And when we found Ardrossan, and Joni let us shoot there, and Chris, it was just like, really? Because it's fully dressed with, you know, it's a museum. And we could never have created that realistically, ever. And there would really be no film without Ardrossan.
Well, speaking of that, somebody asked, what are your favorite rooms of Ardrossan and why?
Barbara, you should answer that one
Yeah.
first, and then I'll answer it. You're on mute.
We have to unmute you. Barbara, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was joking about the men's changing room. Probably better that it was muted. There are wonderful, intense scenes everywhere, but some of my favorites are the shots in the living room and dining room, which are massive spaces, but are made to look human. You focus not on the expanse of the room, you focus on what that character is doing. And I thought that was brilliantly brought to life in an environment that could otherwise be overwhelming.
I want to comment about Ardrossan too. I've only been there once, and I did not know Bob Scott very well. I actually, met him on one occasion where we had a real conversation, but somebody with extraordinary warmth. And I have to say, my one time being at Ardrossan, I think that his spirit really glows there. And I have to say, I thought about him when I was watching the movie. It's a special place.
It's a special place. It's magical when you walk in. One other scene people might not realize when they watch the movie, but that's shot at Ardrossan, is there's a long lunch with the doctor in Virginia Hall. It's kind of the middle point of the film before the false information is everywhere seen. And that is shot at Ardrossan.
At the breakfast room.
The breakfast room, which I,
Yep.
Barbara, I think you would win the
I was
quiz.
looking for that right away by the limestone, and it was shot so tightly that unless you had spent hours and hours and hours in that room trying to restore that stone, you would never know. And I kept looking for clues, and I just thought, feels like it's got to be it. But it's very authentic, and you could have been anywhere.
Totally, and that goes back to what I was saying before about we can't dress all the rooms. So if you're using a room that's not completely 360, you're going to be tight on our faces in the corner, and it works.
And Bill, I think you're quite right about Bob Scott's spirit being very much alive in that house. There is no one who was more focused on democratic ideals, fairness, inclusivity, being righteous in a way that includes so many people and being sensitive to feelings. I think you're absolutely right. And it's wonderful that it's this movie and this story that's being told in this house, his house.
That's beautiful. I agree. Yeah.
Here's another question. How do you decide whose stories you want to portray in film?
Well, for this specific film, for A Call to Spy, there were 39 women historically who worked in the French section of Churchill's Secret Army. All of them are fascinating and could have movies. I chose pioneers, like the firsts, who were also really interesting to me because they had because they were discriminated against and because they were all from different countries. So Noor Inayat Khan was the first female wireless. Virginia Hall was the first female field agent, and Vera Atkins was like the first and only recruiter in this agency. But again, it's not always about that's my first film where it's inspired by true stories. For me, it's more about what commercial genres in filmmaking are missing a female lens in the independent film world, and going there. I do want to do an epic romance, but sometime. This film wasn't it, but I'd love to do an epic romance with a female feminist lens.
We have another question. How has the movie done financially under very difficult conditions?
That's a great question. So my last film, Equity, made a profit when it sold to Sundance, to Sony. This film has just come out. So I'm not at liberty to disclose any of the financials. We get some financials in January. So we shall see. It's TBD, and it's also just rolling out internationally. It will depend on how many people like you click on the movie. So spread the word. But I will say, this wasn't in the plan, and it's been devastating as an independent filmmaker, especially with this film, because with my previous films, it really wouldn't matter if you watch them on the iPhone. I mean, yes, I'd prefer you watch them in the movie theater, but they work. You know, this is a World War II film with score, the emotional impact of surround sound. And because I was lucky enough, the film was awarded the Anti-Defamation League Award in January before the shutdown at the Santa Barbara Festival. And so I saw it in a live audience play. And there, it's like theater. It's like going to an art show. Like if you look at a painting by yourself, you don't always have the same impact as if you watch it in a room full of people. And so I think the pandemic has been, you know, obviously upsetting, but you just have to be innovative and go with the flow and do Zooms and new things.
Well, great. Yeah, Joe and I just put some of Barbara's video for those who haven't seen the house. It'll be fun for you when you see the film and you see Barbara's video talking about the house, just to have some more perspective. So we put that up for everybody.
Well, and Joni and I had actually discussed like doing a screening there with people and cocktails and the premiere, and like there were so many things that were going to happen, but
they can still happen down the line.
Yes.
And our next question is, how did you do the research on the characters, particularly Virginia Hall?
Sure. So I had access to the archives. So each of these ladies have spy files, which gives you a lot of the history, letters they wrote back, training reports, as we discussed. The CIA, because my character was the first woman to work for the CIA after the war, they were incredible. They opened up their research, the OSS, which is the precursor to the CIA. I got their files on Virginia Hall, but they also introduced me to Virginia Hall's living relatives. So I had phone calls with all of them. I had an SOE consultant in the UK who connected me to a friend of Vera Atkins. So there was all kinds of research. I will say that the difficult thing here is they were spies and they're real people, but they didn't give interviews by and large, and you don't have recordings, and they didn't talk about the war after the war. So while you have the facts, how do you get to the internal as an artist? And that was really the challenge for all the actors. For me, it was speaking with the living relatives who would say, you know, she wore a snake bracelet to school. She was pirate chief at the school play. You know, she was always in pain with her leg, but she hid it. You know, she didn't want people to see the limp. Those kinds of details, which aren't in the archives, you know, as an actress, not as a writer, proved more valuable.
That's great. We'll take one or two more questions if anybody has a question, but otherwise, Sarah, we're so grateful for this time with you, and I hope everybody will be able to see the film. When I originally talked to Barbara, I said, well, at least watch the trailer, and then I was so glad when she was able to watch it not once, but twice.
Thank you, Barbara.
Let's see, we have,
what a treat.
Let's see, we have one final question. Let's see. I think we actually, that was a duplicate, so I think we got it.
You know, I do want to mention really quickly, because we mentioned Williams investors, and, you know, there are actually a lot of investors in the Philadelphia community as well. You know, and I do want to, you know, Tony Schneider, Margie Honigman, I don't know if people on this call, I don't want to forget people, but there are a lot of people who also just wanted to support a local filmmaker, and I'm very thankful for that. And that's another reason I like to bring my movies home.
All right, one last question, because it's a good one and it comes to that. It says, how do you start your own production company? Can you share more about that experience as a woman in such a male-dominated industry?
Well, it's actually quite easy. I mean, you just form an LLC. So that's the easy part of like forming the company. But then the challenge is the work. And you know, I always say, just do the work you want to see. And it's so easy to create content, like even if it's just starting it with a short film on your iPhone, but to just start and do it, because you know, in this business, no one's going to do it for you. And it is really difficult as a woman out there. And I don't think it's like, it's not active discrimination. I actually have not seen that in my profession recently. It's just that there aren't as many women creating the original content and the original stories. And that trickles down to not as many female roles, directors, production designers, composers, etc. It starts with creating the concept and getting it done.
Great. We should also add that Sarah is temporarily living in Philadelphia with her newborn daughter, Madison, and her 7-year-old Christopher. So thank you for making the time. between the film. I know you were doing India press today.
No, thank you guys. I mean, this has been so much fun. And honestly, I make movies for viewers, really. And this is the fun part. So I really hope everyone gets to watch it and enjoys it.
Great.
It is a wonderful film, A Call to Spy. I want to thank everyone, Anne, Barbara, Sarah, Joe, for joining us tonight. I want to thank everyone who's watching on this webinar. And we appreciate your time, your attention, and I hope that everybody has enjoyed it as much as we have. Barbara, Sarah, would you like to say good night to everyone or any closing comments? I think that's a good way to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.